But we'll start with the Dr. Wagner. The Liefraumilch he bought was actually made by a guy called Peter Mertz, who I know, who's actually technically very good. And it's made, I think, in Rheinhessen. So it's made in the Rhineland. And it's completely well made, but just a touch dull. Anyway, the Dr. Wagner is the green bottle, which is from the Mosel. Green bottle, Mosel, brown bottle, rye. So you always
is that right? Oh,
that's
right.
absolutely right. So the green bottle tends to be the Mosel. It's not totally foolproof, but 99 times out of 100, green bottle means it's from the Mosel, and the brown bottle means it's from the Rhine. And those are the great wine growing areas of Germany, the Mosel and the Rhine. And the Rhine you can divide up into the bits as you go from Mainz south. Well, north of Mainz, you've got the Rheingau, then you've got Rheinhessen and Rheinpfalz south of Mainz. And then as you go eastwards, you've got the Mosel River, which is sort of tributary, and goes right down through Luxembourg, and they're great into France. And you can have Moselle wines with a double LE. It's the same river. And anyway, this Dr. Wagner comes from the Saar Mosel, and it's a Riesling. And we'll go through the little process if we may. Oh, there you are, chaps. Help yourselves. We'll go through the process. I mean, the colour, it looks sort of pale and green, yeah?
So really pale. And really pale. Even only a hint of green.
Exactly. If you tilt the glass to one side like that, and you look at the rim here, it looks almost like water.
It is.
It's just like, you can hardly see any color at all. I would expect something very light, very easy, very fresh, probably quite high in acid, not much body. But that's what I was expecting just looking at it. And also looking at the color, it looks like a cold climate wine. It looks like the sort of great, let's smell it. I don't want to lead you. You'll draw your own conclusions. But it's not a huge aroma. When you compare it with some of the better wines, it hasn't got a huge aroma, but quite sort of limey and citrus. And even maybe grassy. The thing about talking about smells and flavors is if I say, doesn't this smell of grapefruit? You'll all see grapefruit in it. It's amazing how you can lead.
That's actually one thing I was going to say, Chris. So I've only started to just appreciate wine. I'm 23, but when I smell it, I always struggle to. Maybe it's because I don't have anything to compare it against. But when, like you say, when I ask my dad, "Oh, what do you smell?" and he says lime, then I can only think of lime. And if I was coming up with my own thought on it, I would struggle. Yeah. Maybe that's just due to inexperience, I guess. Have a look down there.
I think, James, you need to practice every day, dear boy.
Brilliant.
I get something slightly, not quite petrol-y, but a little bit of
kerosene.
Kerosene, yeah.
In a nice way. Well, that's typical of the Riesling grape, Mark. Well done, well spotted. That's absolutely typical of the Riesling grape. And as the wine gets older, more of that kerosene, it's like sweet, it's almost sweet kerosene. Like, you're filling your car up with petrol. And it's almost like that. That's typical of Riesling, the Riesling grape.
Fascinating.
And that comes on to the sort of complexing factors again, which there's not much. Is there a bit of earthy, stony? Perhaps there's a bit of stony minerally.
A little bit of almost like gravelly.
Gravelly. Let's taste it and see whether that lime gravelly kerosene comes through on the palate as well. A bit. There's lots of fruit there.
Wow.
That's different. I wasn't expecting that.
No.
Lime. I've got lime.
Like very, very ripe fruit, isn't it? Very ripe fruit.
It is. It's fresh.
Fresh, very fruity. And
Really fresh.
And there's a little bit of residual sugar there.
Yes.
Christopher, did you want to talk about how you actually taste?
Yeah. Well, apart from after smelling, what I do is I put the wine in my mouth, swill it round, then bring it to the front of the mouth, and then I suck in air, which bubbles the wine against the palate. And also it allows the wine to release aromas, which actually go up the back of the throat, up what they call the retronasal passage. So it's like turning up the volume on a hi-fi when you do that. I'll show you like this. And suck it, and I wiggle my tongue, and I think you'll find it's a bit like turning up the hi-fi on a stereo. Just gives you get more of it. It just gives you a bit more detail.
That's so interesting.
And then Mark, after you've swallowed it, taste it again.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely get what you were talking about, though. The acid on the side of the tongue and the sweetness
front.
On the front.
Yeah.
Particularly afterwards. Now I can pinpoint that.
You can.
Yeah.
And there's no sort of bitterness or tannic or anything particularly on the back of the tongue.
No.
I mean, so this is highly commercial sort of wine. A lot of people who like a bit of sweetness in their wine keep in their fridge. But quite nicely made, and it's got that sort of northern climate freshness and lightness. I don't know what the alcohol content is of this, but I suspect it's very low. I suspect it's 9%, something like that. Yeah. Can we see what the
9.5? Yeah.
9.5. Okay. Which, when you think that most wine that you drink today is white and red is sort of 12.5, 13, up to Australian stuff 14, even 14.5%. And the work I've done with, because I'm quite keen on the work that some people do on alcoholism, because I've had friends who've drunk too much and killed themselves. So I'm really quite keen on levels of alcohol. And I did a paper for George Osborne when he was Chancellor on how he could use the duty regime to influence winemakers and consumers on which wines to drink, because the doctors will tell you that for every 1% of alcohol you go up, the liver function is a sort of in reverse ability. So every 1% of alcohol you go up, you have sort of 5 or 10% reduction in your liver's ability to absorb and process alcohol. And what's happened over the last sort of 30, 40 years is that alcohol levels have gone up and up and up and up and up. That when I was a kid, there used to be wines used to be 10.5, 11.5% maximum. In the hot vintage, 12.5. Now you're lucky to find wines as low alcohol as this, and they go right up to 14, 15%, and your liver just can't process that. And then it's the same with cider, and it's the same with beer. It's much easier to make a wine, a product, because I brewed as well. It's much easier to make a product with lots of alcohol, and people like alcohol, particularly if but it's not good for them. And so, and you know, in the Midlands, Mitchells and Butlers, we used to brew mild ale, which was 2%, 2.5% alcohol, and that was fine because the working men's club, the chaps would go in there after they'd been in the factory or wherever, and they'd drink 8 or 10 pints, and at 2.5%, it didn't matter. But now you can't find low gravity mild ale, and you can't find low gravity wine. I think it's very important that, you know, the people understand that actually the liquor industry have not been good, and the government have not been good at actually encouraging. You can imagine with the duty regime, if you encourage lower alcohol wines to have much less duty and higher alcohol wines to have a heavier duty, what that would do, it would encourage a big shift. But they haven't got the message yet.
Oh.
That's my rant about alcohol.